Welcome to City of Littleton Planning Board. Tonight we have a study session, and we just have 3 items that we're going to talk about, and then tomorrow night we have a joint session with City Council here in this room.
Motion to extend this meeting till 10:30.
Cerny? I don't hear a second.
My real motion is to get out a little early.
Right. Well, get into it right away, and we'll see how quickly we can do that. So we're going to start with the neighborhood plan update. And Glenn, are you going to pretty much take us through this stuff? And
Yeah. This is really the agenda. These A, 1, 2, and 3. It's the same agenda for tomorrow night. So I'll turn. And actually, number 1, we'll just give a quick update to the board. But Dennis has got some materials prepared. As you remember, at our last meeting, you wanted to see an intro. Well, we have that for you tonight. So I thought we'd spend some time and go through that. And with your blessing, then we'll move on and post the plan as edited on our website. And then we got a couple of quick presentation on accessory dwelling units. That's the one thing we haven't really talked about yet, but it is something that's been on the council's goals and objectives, so I know they are keen to talk about it tomorrow night. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dennis.
Okay. Yeah, we went through and at the January 12th meeting, we had final amendments, I think. We went through and looked at the changes you wanted to make. And I think there was general agreement that what we're going to do at this point is just do the most conservative edit possible, just really more of an update, really picking out the goals and policies which you felt really are obviously out of date, are no longer feasible, or have been accomplished. So those 3 things, the 3 criteria. So we went through and looked at all of them. I think did a good job in terms of being pretty comprehensive, excuse me. And the one area that really took a hit was the central area, of course, because sub-areas 1 and 2 were replaced by the downtown neighborhood plan. Sub-neighborhood 3, however, we left as it was, and only made those changes that we did with the others. So what we've done is, we've got copies that everybody want. If you do want these, we will be posting these online. So if you'd like a hard copy, I've got those for you as well. But we will be posting them. But we wanted to have an introduction to kind of lead people into it and say, here's what we'd like you to look at. Here's what the board has done. So what you have in front of you is our draft intro, and we'd like you to go through it and just make sure we've included what you want to include. It's one of those things where we kind of went back and forth in terms of how simple do we make it, how comprehensive do we make it. Fairly simple, you lose people in terms of what the process is, where we are in the process, what have we done. Too comprehensive, and it gets very messy in terms of it's fairly complex in terms of why we're doing what, when was adopted, what was updated when. So this is hopefully kind of a compromise between the two. The first page is looking at the map and just saying, okay, we had 8 neighborhoods that were included in the 1981/2000 neighborhood plan. 1981, they were written initially. In 2000, the planning board, city council went back and did exactly what you're doing now, which is pulled out those items which they thought were out of date, had been completed. So really an update. It really was not going back to the neighborhoods. It was not getting new information, looking at new issues, new goals, new policies, really just trying to clean it up. And so those top 8 neighborhoods are the ones that happened with. We have 3 additional neighborhoods on the bottom, the ones in the blue, Southwest neighborhood, Trailmark neighborhood, and South Santa Fe corridor, which were not included in the 1981/2000 plan, and that we need to be dealing with at some point, but you have not dealt with it at this point, and we're trying to explain that we will come back with a much more comprehensive process for both the first 8 neighborhoods that were done, as well as the other 3 that did not have a plan written for them initially. it also goes through and tries to explain a little bit about the fact that the process itself was looking at the priorities that City Council put together when we did the citywide neighborhood plan, or citywide plan, excuse me, that there are priorities included in that talk about which neighborhood plans, which corridor plans, which small area plans are top priority, what needs to be done when, and the planning board is following that set of priorities as adopted by council. And so we have one neighborhood in there, which Progress Park, which was looked at as a high priority. We looked at Trailmark as a medium priority, and everything else was considered a low priority in terms of neighborhoods, whereas the corridors and the activity areas were considered to be high or medium priorities in all cases. And so we try and explain that what we're trying to spend our time on at this point is the corridors, particularly the two corridors that we're starting with, stationary plans for Mineral and also for downtown light rail station areas, and that then we'll be going following those priorities as we extend beyond that. And at some point, we will be coming back to the neighborhoods, but we're hoping that this will hold until then. And asking them to go through, did we get it right? So what's written in red is kind of saying, okay, what we'd like you to do is go through and see, did we get it right in terms of eliminating what was should have been deleted because it's been accomplished, or because it's no longer feasible, or because it no longer makes sense. And did we let us know in terms of what you think in terms of the process? So we're not asking for additional information at this point. We anticipate we'll get additional ideas, and I think we'll have to deal with that at some point in terms of how do we deal with that in terms of some kind of a basket. We stick that in and keep that, so we continue to get those ideas and have them when we're ready to go forward with the planning process, and see if there's something we need to be dealing with more immediately rather than the long term. Is there something, pop-top scrape-offs? Is there something which is going to be an issue perhaps with some of the neighborhoods or citywide that we need to be pulling out and either dealing with neighborhood by neighborhood or citywide? So we will be getting some of those and anticipate that, but in the meantime, we're really trying to focus just on this, and then the board and staff will be getting into the stationary plans pretty intensely, and we're coming out to the, for public process with those as well.
Is your new plan just this one with the line through? Or,
yeah, that's it.
So everything's just lined out?
This is it. This is it with the lines through it, highlighted, and that's, let me show you. I'll go ahead and pass them out just so you can see them. This is what we are going to be posting. We'll obviously letting them know it's a draft, it's not final. So this should be, as you saw it, it has the old maps, the new maps. It has the individual goals or policies that have been eliminated, and those are highlighted as well as crossed out. And that's really about it. We also have a clean copy of this, of course, but I think for purposes of what we're asking the public to do, we really need to have the marked up copy for them to look at. So.
On this intro, you're going to put this in front?
Yeah.
I hate to ask you this, but these arrows?
They're a little small, aren't they?
Well, and they go every which way. I was
Okay.
wondering if maybe we could put the numbers in the map instead.
Sure.
Maybe
yeah.
expand the map a little bit.
Uh-huh.
I'm mostly worried about if somebody prints this out in black and white, which I tend to do.
Okay.
That the colors will get lost and the direction to the correct neighborhood will get
Great.
lost.
Yeah, good thought. Okay, good.
You could put the additional neighborhoods in blue. I mean, I don't know, it's just a suggestion.
Okay, or do those with letters. Yeah, do ABC
Or
on
letters,
those.
yeah,
Sure.
We do have it on the first page here. I don't know if we need to state it again. Maybe it can just go away.
Go back and use that, yeah.
Well, it seems like your introduction is missing an opening paragraph that just generally for somebody that's never looked at a comprehensive plan from Littleton,
Okay.
it just introduces the comprehensive plan, what generally it does, and no more than a couple of sentences, and then leads you into the fact that we had, eight neighborhood plans attached to the comprehensive plans. And it needs to be a little softer. You're just like jumping right into it and fully expecting everybody to know exactly the process that we know.
Sure.
Of course, most people don't. So it needs a little softer introduction.
Good, thank you.
All you see in both of those comments, obviously the arrows that's a graphic design cluster.
Wow.
That needs to be done differently, much simpler. And then to Mark's point, I would call this entire document notes for the reader.
Okay.
An introduction is, hi, welcome to Littleton. Nice to see you. Glad you're here.
Okay.
This is specifically relating to the history and purpose of this document. And I see nothing wrong other than just some minor grammatical issues. But other than that, I think it's a great explanation of what this is.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Well, I take this as something to be edited, right?
Yes.
We'll have a chance to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You can't. Everybody else.
Go for it.
You know me, I like editing.
I know you can't help yourself.
My wife's an editor, of course. She'll kill me if I don't look at it.
I'm a little confused. If I were someone who had a copy of the 85 plan, wouldn't they see 9 neighborhoods?
They would see 9 neighborhoods, and it would be worth explaining that perhaps we do explain it internally in terms of trail mark and the fact that it was changed. It really wasn't a neighborhood plan. It was included. But
I just think there needs to be a sentence or two explaining. And the other thing, what's the actual date on is it the 85 or 81?
81. And then there's a 2000 and 2005. So 2000 was the update, 2005 was the reprint.
There's a lot of years being thrown around.
There are a lot of years.
And your asterisks are a little confusing to me.
Okay.
The red asterisk, what is that?
The red is talking about the first part, which are the 8 neighborhoods that were included. And I can explain that with a sentence.
Above the picture.
Right. So basically saying plans for 8 neighborhoods were included, and there's an asterisk, and those are the 8 neighborhoods. But I can go ahead and do that with a sentence.
Why did you say there's 9? What's the 9th one?
Trail mark was included.
And that was in the comprehensive plan? But just as a development plan?
Right. Not until later.
Well, we called it was called a neighborhood plan, but it was really the development plan guidelines that were stuck in there.
And it came in 2000.
Oh, they added that in 2000? That's even more confusing. Okay.
Yeah. And then South Santa Fe went through 3 iterations.
Okay. So I don't know if it necessarily matters. I mean, because at the end of the day, we're talking about 8 neighborhoods.
Right.
But if you wanted to give history, maybe it would just be clearer just to have a list, a timeline saying 1981, or neighborhood plan 2000, update, trail mark added, 2000, whatever, this happened. Just today this is what we have.
Great.
And now we're updating that.
Okay, good.
I think just be straightforward and to the point. So are you wanting the board, whoever wants to provide editorial comment?
Whatever, yeah, absolutely.
Not necessarily now, but between now and...
Now, the next couple of days, yeah.
Next couple of days.
Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
Well, just whenever we post it, we'd like to post it soon, but yeah.
Can we get this online?
Yes,
As a
absolutely. I can send it to you
PDF or a Word
electronically.
document? That makes just make it a lot easier.
Yeah, I can send it to you electronically.
We have editors on staff too, and we haven't had a chance to
Yeah.
get them to look at. So from the grammatical end, that can certainly be looked at. Is it conveying the right message is really what we want from you folks.
The other thing that I guess I'm having trouble connecting is, I mean, the three distinctions that are identified, projects have been completed, they've been replaced by goals and policies and newer plans, they're no longer feasible. We're indicating those are the three reasons, but I know we debated all these points, these changes at length. And so if I just picked up this, was reading it, I'd be like, well, why are they wanting to delete that? I mean, that's a pretty good goal. So I'm a little concerned that this could become like the heritage thing where people look at, are you aware that the planning board is trying to not have open space in the central area? I mean, that's crazy. And so I'm wondering, do we need to explain these changes any further, or is it?
Possible, we could go through and explain each one as they're made in terms of why, kind of maybe a classification or something. We could tie it into 1, 2, 3, or even a little bit more text in terms of why this was deleted.
Yeah, I had the same impression, and one of the things, what I was going to ask is, are we prepared to provide feedback to questions? Because what I expect will happen, you'll start getting comments of, as you just said, RC, and how are we going to address those comments so that they don't get out of control online? Another way to address that is to just call it out on the document and say, removed because updated by, et cetera, or removed because no longer valid under scenario 1. So that as they're reading through it, I think that's a
I
good
would
point.
be more in favor of that than
Me
a
too.
separate document, because
Me too.
either somebody's not going to read it, or they're not going to read it in full.
Yeah.
And they're not going to connect the dots.
I agree.
Just a short sentence
each one.
on the ones,
Yeah.
not even necessarily every one, but the
Right.
ones that might cause some controversy.
Okay, good.
There are, we know which ones those are.
Well, I think you should, everyone. If you're going to do it, you should do all.
Yeah.
And some of them may be one sentence answer, or one
Right.
word answers.
Well, the downtown one would be, general comment about how they've been replaced by the
By
downtown
the time
study.
we just
But
do,
let
I
us
think
be-
each sub-neighborhood.
Let us be careful. If these are the three scenarios, then you reference, you say this scenario, and
Okay.
let's use the same words. So again, we're not creating more
Good.
confusion.
Okay.
Right, I can see somebody not paying attention and read goal number 4 of the central area neighborhood. We crossed out, encourage the retention of historic and small-town character of Main Street.
Uh-oh.
They crossed it out. Well, we replaced it with the
Right.
downtown plan, which
Downtown
does
plan.
even better.
Good.
I think that's good. A little explanation.
Good. Will do.
So
I
that would,
like tying it into each one of these three
Yep.
things.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like a different color or something like, that. You're gonna keep the yellow and the.
We could do a different color
and
for
have
each
a
one.
different
Sure.
color for the explanation of why it's been
Sure.
deleted.
Yeah, so they go through it and easily
Green
see
or
them.
whatever,
Right.
picking up.
Red.
You already got red. Draft update.
Change the color of the draft.
Okay.
Dennis, my comments, and I'll provide, via email.
Great.
I actually think there's a lot of information here, more than I think we need to present at this
Okay.
time. Because at the end of the day, what we're just trying to do is say, there are 8 neighborhoods. We've updated these 8 neighborhoods, so that's the first objective of this document. So in some ways, to me, this last piece becomes the first piece that we talk about. Because here's what we want you to do. We want you to look at this old plan, recognize that we've updated it, assuming these 3 criterias, and now we want you, public, to review and comment, did we get it right? Stop. Then, the next is, and, because the next question they'll have is, well, what's going to happen next? Well, so I think then that's where some of this other language might come in to say, here, and I don't know what the order is, but I just feel like the first thing we need to do is, what's here? What do you need to do with this information? And what's the desired action or output that we want from you? And then if you need to provide some of this context, I think as Andrew said, maybe it's notes for the reader, by the way, or here's some history. But I think let's start with what we want them to do before they get lost in all the information and then have to process it all.
Okay, good.
And I like Randy's idea. I had the same thought from a timeline perspective. So that just visually, I think it's easier to just say, oh, this changed, this changed, this changed, without having to put so much wording behind it.
Okay, good.
But I'll provide that in a
Great, okay,
email.
thank you. Super, thanks.
It's a tough challenge because you have such intimate knowledge of all of this, and the average citizen, and myself included, I'm on the planning board, and it's still like, to just see it from a newbie's perspective, a citizen's perspective, that's the challenge, I think, is
But, yeah,
it's simple.
okay, go ahead. Yeah, we did one version which was very simple, where we just kind of got into just do this, and then began to worry that it wasn't enough, so.
Right, it's
But you're right, it is a balance, yeah, good.
The fine line.
Okay, good. I appreciate the comments.
So Dennis, coming back to, so this is going on Open Littleton?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And if people are posting on there, is there someone that's manning that to provide responses either from the city or to clarify any facts that are incorrect or assumptions? So someone's going to be looking
Yeah,
and...
Mark is the staff person for that, and he'll forward that to us.
Okay.
I'm going to jump over you if you have comments.
And will there be a note on Nextdoor that says, go to Open Littleton, the plans are out there to be reviewed?
Right, as well as littletongov.org, so, yeah, all three.
littletongov.org.
I have an article on there, so.
And I saw it in the Littleton Independent. Did it say it was going to, I don't remember if it said it was going to go on Open Littleton or not, or just, I don't remember.
We weren't very specific.
Yeah.
I think we
just said
said
we're going
online.
through this, yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Well,
that's
Try
fine.
to keep it fairly general in terms
Yep,
of timeframe.
yep.
You get into the discussion of activity areas, corridor plans, station area plans. Do you think that is important to know in reviewing this document?
I don't think it is in terms of reviewing the document. I think it is in terms of why aren't you doing the neighborhood plans right now, perhaps?
Okay,
Just because the citywide plan had priorities for these other.
right, that is true.
Can we just reference the citywide plan to see what's up, go to the citywide plan to familiarize yourself with where we're heading, and that way, again, you're eliminating it from having to essentially duplicate the message that we put in the citywide plan here, where you can just reference that document, and then that's an opportunity for people to begin to get familiar and engage with the citywide plan.
Good.
Any other comments?
So, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. So for tomorrow night, I think if maybe somebody from the board would kind of like to talk about what you've done so far and the plan going forward, so they know it is moving forward, that would be wonderful.
I think Karina agreed to do that.
Did Karina? Oh, awesome, okay. I thought you were joking. She agreed.
I think she did.
I was volunteer, yeah, that's fine.
Excellent. Okay, anything else?
So with that, though, so I think we had, what we can share with the council tomorrow is, here's how we're approaching the neighborhood plans based on the guidance that you gave us to just kind of do a cleanup on the neighborhood plans. But then and I don't know if this is what we want to talk about tomorrow as well, is, so what's coming next? We've addressed the neighborhoods, at least the ones that we've already done, the 8, but what is going to happen with the next step, the corridor plans, the station area plans, the truly updating the neighborhood plans? Is there anything there that we want to share or we should be sharing?
For the corridor plans?
And the neighborhood plans,
And the neighborhood
Getting
plans.
back-
But that's like longer, recognizing it's longer term, but what is going to be that next step?
Well, on the corridor plans, we've submitted basically an RFP to get our RTD to approve that, because we are partners. We have a couple of partners. We have DRCOG and the Transportation District. So that's been submitted. Our city attorney's reviewing some language on the IGA that we have to agree to with those two entities. And then what we are going to do is based on who bids, so we're bidding the mineral station and the downtown station together. And Dennis and I's hope is that we can also include the Santa Fe corridor study as well as a part of that. So we get one big swath of the community all studied and planned out ahead of time. Now, our recent development is on Littleton Boulevard. So we did have money in our account to do a streetscape study specifically for Main Street. And so that's all the widening of sidewalk. Do we stick with the one-way streets? Is there additional street furniture that we need to incorporate into Main Street? But I believe council has asked that we extend that all the way out to Broadway Road. So potentially, so Michael has sent me the language on that RFP, and I'm going to widen the scope of that. So we could potentially be moving into Littleton Boulevard as well this year, potentially.
Streetscaping, correct?
No, I think I'm going to add language about appropriate land uses, market study, because there's also crossover with the station area plan. So there's going to be a market study as part of that. So what are those uses that we're missing? Karina, you've talked about what's kind of the niche in Littleton Boulevard. I think that's something that could be addressed as well.
So potentially with this streetscape, broaden the scope of that study, it'll go from Santa Fe to Broadway, and that will begin to craft our corridor, our Littleton Boulevard corridor study.
Yeah, I hope that would be the end result or the deliverable from that
Then
effort.
we have the Santa Fe corridor, we have potentially a plan for the Littleton corridor, and then we have the Broadway corridor. Anything in the works on the Broadway corridor?
Broadway is yet to be determined, so I think that we're going to have to say next year on that.
Year and a half away, 2
Yeah,
years easily.
I think easily. But if you like, I can talk about those things and then just, and then just kick it to you for an update on the neighborhood plan, so you don't have to get bogged down in all that. All right.
So you said there was funding for a downtown street effort?
Yes. Yeah, it actually was in the city manager's office.
Okay.
Right. But council has recently asked, can we expand that effort and take it all the way out to Broadway, because that's a gateway into our community. And it's our goal to look at Littleton Boulevard, so.
And when they say look at it, they mean more funding to look at it?
Oh, well, yeah, we'll have to see.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then coming back to the neighborhoods, we will not revisit the neighborhoods until we've completed the corridor plans. That was the direction that was given to us from a priority perspective.
With the exception of Progress Park, I think, which was a high priority as well. So.
Well, yeah, and I think let's see how much effort is really required of the board. Perhaps, this summer we can get into some more detail on the neighborhood plans. Yeah, I'm not really sure yet on that. But I think we want to get it out online for at least 2 months and let it steep out there and see if there's issues that we didn't think of that we need to delve into more detail.
So once we get the input from online or other forums of this update, do we have a public meeting to consider this updated and republish an edited version of the 1981 neighborhood plans?
Yeah, ultimately, you'll have to at least have a public hearing and recommend approval to council through a resolution, and then they would do the formal adoption, right?
Of the edited 1981 comp plan, neighborhood plan.
Yeah.
And then a next step would be re-looking at, truly adding maybe new policies and new things like that. There is going to be.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That's not.
Yeah, I don't know, I throw it out to the board. I don't know if you want to go through a formal adoption of the semi-edited neighborhood plan.
What's the purpose of editing it if it's not adopted? Because if it's not adopted, then it's not a new plan.
Well, I think if,
Or it's not
it could happen. Everybody says, hey, that's great. I think you've hit everything. Good job.
But don't you still have to have a public, but even so, don't you
Yeah.
still have to have a public forum to
Right.
officially
Yes.
adopt it? So it
You would
becomes the
absolutely
new
have to do
document that we
If
reference?
it's your final draft and you're ready to adopt it, yes, you have to have a public hearing,
As-
at least one.
So to her point, we have this edited document out for public comment. We calculate the comments. Really not sure what exactly the changes might be, because we all decided it's either a wholesale elimination or not of a policy. We're not going to edit policies just to satisfy some comments. Do a public hearing to get more comments and to agree as a board to recommend it to the city council. They approve it. And what do we have?
You've got a revised neighborhood plans as part of the comprehensive plan.
Are they binding?
Yes. No, absolutely. Well,
So we have a
binding as much as
2015 comp plan.
Right.
So it is a final plan.
If that's the direction we end up going, and you don't want to go out in the neighborhoods and deal with other issues that might come up through this.
Well, it's the latest and greatest of that moment, or that time period. We may revisit it
2016.
later.
You could do
But
that.
it would be currently, does the board agree with that? I mean, it's approved by the council as written. It is now the 2015 comprehensive plan.
Yes. Knowing full well that in 3, 4 years, 2 years, we'll go into the individual neighborhoods,
Right.
rewrite the individual neighborhood plans, and then amend the neighborhood plans.
Then
It
it's
becomes the
not
2017 version.
Yeah.
Aren't you supposed to redo the comprehensive plan every 5 years or something? We do it every 30 years, whether we need to or not.
You know what I
Put it on
think
the
I
timeline.
what I like about that, I think it can become more iterative than it has potentially in the past. So we may end up doing one neighborhood a year, and I think it's okay to say, in 2016, we have a public hearing specifically for Progress Park neighborhood, and now we've updated Progress Park effective 2017. Then 2018, so I think it can work that way, and I think it's achievable and in line with really how I think realistically this is going to play out, as opposed to waiting another 5 years before we get all of them done and then all of a sudden do it all.
No, we
So I
do
think this
one
will.
at a time and get approval one at a time, and have it become part of the comprehensive plan one at a time.
And it helps us to address really where the priorities are. So where do we have to focus on now before it becomes, the tail wagging the dog thing?
See, I would like to get to a point where we're no longer referencing 1981 and 2000.
That's a goal.
It will
That's a
become
good
history.
goal. Yeah.
And now it will become the 2015 plan. Other variation or iterations may be amended 2015 comp plan, and maybe in 2020, the planning board at the time, or the council may say, we want to do a complete redo. It's 5 years. We want to do a complete redo, reformat. That's their prerogative at that point in time. But for now, we'll have the 2015 comprehensive plan.
I think one of the biggest benefits of taking all of these other items out of here is that we don't rehash them every year, 2 years, 3 years.
point.
Many of these we went through 6 years ago when I
Right.
started here, and we've gone through them
So
4,
Karina, are
5,
you up?
6, 7 times. So get them out of here, then we can go clean forward.
Are you satisfied that you have the information to give a summary
Yeah.
where we are?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Do you need anything like paper to distribute, or do we just talk about it?
No,
or
I think you can just talk
If I
about
have
it.
time,
It's
I'll
pretty
throw
informal.
something on a piece of paper, but if not,
Okay.
I'll just speak to it. And I think the other thing I just want to vocalize here, because I'm going to say it tomorrow as well, when we get the comments back from the public, there might be things that we missed, but we'll have to make a decision of what we change based on the same 3 criteria. So we just have to be very consistent to what we set out from the beginning.
We also need to be very firm here, because some of the comments we get back will be for new things
Right.
that they want for a neighborhood that are valid, and boy, that's great.
Yes.
But that's not our duty here.
Exactly, and that's why I want to for us to stick to this as our criteria.
Stick to the house cleaning edits,
Yep.
period.
Yep.
But file away and tell people we're filing away those great ideas when we get to the neighborhood plans individually. But right now, we got to get through these edits without getting bogged down, these house cleaning edits.
Yep, I agree.
Are we going to try and have an updated information for the reader for tomorrow night?
We can, yeah, sure. If you'd like one. If you want
If
to hand it
anything
out.
comes in and you have time to make it,
Okay,
so be it.
okay.
So,
And how long will we post it for? Is it a matter of time or a matter of number of comments? So
I think it's a
everybody-
matter of time, really, yeah. I thought, so we post it for 2 months, so we get time for the Littleton report to come out again, and again, remind them, and this time have a specific location, more specific directions to what we're looking for. So I think it's helpful to have more time rather than less.
So what does that time look like for you? Is it 2 months or?
It's, let's see, it just came out, so February 1st, won't come again until April 1st. So if we were to post, yeah, for February, March, and then I'd have to stay open a little bit in April, probably, so.
Okay.
yeah.
Is that usually the time frame you give things that you're posting to open?
That's a
those?
little longer than we typically give,
Okay.
but I think this is an unusual situation, too, because it
Yeah,
is citywide, it's kind of an unusual thing, so.
I think that makes sense, and we're going to talk about the retreat that's potentially in May, so it's kind of good timing that this kind of closes. We can even, put it in as an agenda item at the retreat if we want to. All right.
Cool.
Yeah, that's good.
that's not on here.
It is. Yeah, I'm sure it is.
B.
Yes, B.
B.
Oh, I didn't, my glasses, okay, put these on.
Thank
Okay.
you, Dennis.
All right,
Accessory dwelling units. All right. And I do want to give thanks to Kurt. He sent me some, I think, what those Fannie Mae guidelines?
Guidelines of their underwriting.
Yeah.
Guide.
Oh, interesting.
And we included that in your, and what we sent to you. So as I mentioned, the council has had a goal in their goals and objectives to evaluate ADU opportunities and other residential development limitations in the code. And in essence, to really boil it down, an accessory dwelling unit is basically you're creating an additional unit in a single-family zoning district. So right now, you're allowed to have an additional room that could be detached from the main house. You can have sleeping quarters, you can have a bathroom, you can have a bar and a very small kitchenette. But where we draw the line, how we interpret this is once you put a full-size range oven, now you've created a full kitchen, so you've created a full dwelling unit, and you can't do that in a single-family dwelling unit. So there's been a lot of move to allow these. A lot of communities around us, Dennis has done quite a bit of research in these. A lot of communities are saying, why? You basically have a lot of these units existing. Why not provide for additional dwelling unit? There's some advantages to the community. You're not really raising the density of the community. You're providing possibly affordable housing units. And you're also providing a way for older folks to stay within their home, generate more revenue, and basically age in place. So a lot of urbanists think this is a good thing for a city. So we just took a little bit more detailed look. In the picture below, I don't think, was that here in Colorado, Dennis? Or?
That one's in Boulder, yeah.
That's Boulder, so you can see the dwelling unit behind. So I think he's standing out on his back porch with an accessory dwelling unit basically behind him.
How is this different?
Well, duplexes are, well, that's a very good question. There could be equal in all forms, and in most cases, accessory dwelling unit has to be subservient to the principal residence. And there's a number of ways, and we'll go through a lot of criteria that we look at to make sure.
But I think a duplex can be sold separately as 2 units, whereas an accessory dwelling.
Not necessarily.
No.
Not necessarily, no. But I think the difference would more be this is a single-family unit lot, and you're in a single-family unit neighborhood instead of a multifamily unit neighborhood, zoning-wise. And so the accessory dwelling unit, I first thought of them as a mother-in-law apartment. So it's not a duplex per se, and once you change it into a duplex, then it changes a lot of the rules for Fannie Mae underwriting.
So I may still call it an accessory dwelling unit, but in all intents and purposes, it can look like a duplex.
No, not necessarily.
No, it has
Does
to
it have
be,
It's not supposed to have an entrance in
do-
the front.
Well, it depends on what, duplex is 2 units. Doesn't say one side of the duplex is 1,200 square feet and the other side is 600 square feet. It's still a duplex
So
of 2 units.
So I think that's the point that Glenn just made. It has to be, would you call it subservient to the primary?
What we're recommending is, yes, it's not, there's a principal residence and there's an accessory residence.
Could you
And
go
there's-
through the cook stove range being the key
Yeah.
delineation part
Yeah.
again?
We currently allow a detached structure, and they can have everything except for a range, and that's legal currently under our code.
They can have a microwave, they can have a stovetop, they can have a coffee maker, they can have a dishwasher, they can have a sink.
Yeah, the stove
like
top,
college.
question.
Could you draw a kitchen of what we can have in one? I'm almost serious, right?
I promise you, nobody goes in and adds a range after we approve it. I'm sure that never happens.
What's that hole in the kitchen for?
can they rent it out currently, or is it just for their own personal use?
They could rent it out currently, right?
And that's in all districts?
Well, I guess the question is,
Residential districts?
from a fair housing standpoint, is that really
Legal dwelling unit?
a legal dwelling unit if you don't have a range?
No.
Yeah. Right.
I've been involved in transactions where there was a similar type unit, and the only way we could do the financing on it is if they went in and tore the stove and dishwasher out of the unit, took it out, and the appraiser had to go back out and look at it again.
Yep.
So
And
it's
you
no
call
longer a
it- you call it
two-unit
a
property.
bar. You call it a
It was
bar.
now, just an extra bedroom and
Yeah.
open space.
I sold one last year that had a separate house on in downtown Littleton, and there wasn't any issue with the financing. They did, and even though it's a full rental, unit next to it.
But
So I wonder-
was the
You
zoning-
appraise it as a two-unit, though. Because then if it is a two-unit, and if it's a fully usable property, and you've got rent coming in on that, then the appraiser has to use different criteria to appraise that property, and he has to find other like-kind
Which is hard
properties
to do, yeah.
of two units out there, and it potentially changes your down payment, your interest rate. There's a lot of things that it can
What
affect.
what zoning is it not permitted? Just the R zonings?
The single-family district, so that's, help me, Dennis, it's R3,
R1, R2, yeah.
1, R2.
Allowed in CA?
CA is a multifamily district, so it wouldn't be questioned, and that maybe is the unit you had,
It was
Gary,
in
was,
R4, I believe.
it was in R4, so that's a multifamily district, I believe.
Unit.
Well, R5 is,
I think it's,
Hit my
R4 single.
code.
So I'm still not clear.
number,
These
maybe
are
it's R5.
2 units on a single-family
Lot.
zoning. If I have 2 units on a multi-family zoning, they could look exactly the same. In a single-family, you can only sell it as one. In multifamily, you can only sell it as one. So, to me, they
I
sound
think-
like multifamily.
I think a lot of that is going to depend on the criteria that the individual jurisdiction selects to define them. But in some cases, they couldn't be obvious from the front, for example. They have to be in the back.
I got you, so you're
There
saying-
are different criteria that they're going to be using. But I think Glenn's going to go through some of kind of what it looks
It
like.
talks about not having two
Gotcha.
entrances
Okay, I
in
missed that
front.
distinction. Then you'd have a,
So, just to be clear, in the R1, R2, and R3
that's the
are
distinction, okay.
these units without a stove, everything but a stove, are they allowed in the R1, R2, and R3 in Littleton?
yep,
They are.
yeah, a lot of times they call them studios, like art studios, or a
And-
mother-in-law unit.
Are there maximums, let's say if they're detached, is there maximum square footage allowed? Is there a height limit in the code? Is there setback requirements for these if they're detached?
If they're detached, yes, there's height requirements. I believe you can't go over 15 feet. There's setback requirements. I can't quote all of them for you, but any detached structure has different requirements, and that, I wouldn't suggest we change that.
Is there a maximum square footage for a detached, everything but the stove unit?
It's got to be less than the principal structure, and you can't exceed the total coverage. for the
The total coverage of the
district.
entire lot.
Right, and then there's also an open space requirement for the lot.
So if you had a 1,900 square foot house, you could have an 1,899 square foot accessory dwelling unit.
If the garages are that big, I mean, some people have detached garages and they're that big, right?
That's correct, as long as it's slightly smaller.
Right.
It could be quite large, if you have a.
Yeah, and I've
house.
got some examples here, and this new home, right? This is a new subdivision called Highlands Garden Village, maybe you know where this is at?
It's the old Elitch Gardens. So,
Village Gardens,
so
right.
this is probably 10 years old, these houses that they built. And this whole row have carriage houses, all the houses along there.
But that was originally designed, built, and zoned for that type
For
of
those,
property.
exactly, yeah.
It wasn't something we're trying to squeeze into a single.
No, it wasn't infill. These were built for that.
The track lights on a separate switch.
I'm sorry.
The track lights, can we turn those off?
Oh, sure.
Dog owner.
And actually, the only thing I'm concerned about here, well, the reason I was asking that question, Glenn, was, is someone, is the neighborhood, are they going to come forward and say, okay, what you just did is just, in essence, changed my zoning and you made it multifamily. You may not have called it multifamily, but you're essentially allowing multifamily.
Is it?
You know what I mean?
Multifamily,
I'm just trying to,
Agreed, but.
We're only allowing a single subservient accessory unit, right?
Can we, I'm sorry to yes and, but can we specifically say our intent here is not to create a secondary unit? And so it is not subject to interpretation. We're not changing your zoning. We're simply addressing accelerated dwelling units. We're not going beyond that scope.
Right. Right, so I would say adding an additional dwelling unit is really not true, because you're still going to have the same amount of traffic. We're going to address parking. We're going to address that it has to be a subservient unit. And it's structures that people, as Mark pointed out, you can build a structure anyhow. So really, what's the impact of a two-bedroom apartment with it?
Because when my mom goes to live there, it's an accessory dwelling unit. When my mom moves out to wherever she goes and I rent it to the college kid who moves in, I've now changed the game. And in the city's eyes, I've done nothing different.
Right.
And A is okay, mom can move in. B, I'm not allowing my neighborhood to turn into a dorm.
It could happen. Everybody thinks of the grandma living upstairs, fine and dandy, and you get the kegger with the 3 college.
Sooner or later, grandma's
And
moving
agony.
out.
You know, the house next door to you could be rented out to 5 college kids, too.
Right.
We don't really pick who lives in houses, right? So
But
I
this is
would
an
say
exception.
that's not your issue.
Well, one of the requirements here potentially is to have the owner live in the house, not rent out. both
Right.
units.
I don't think you can do that. I don't think you'd get away with it. I think you'd get a lawsuit.
It's in some of these.
Some municipalities.
I bet that if they got sued, they would lose that
Yeah,
suit.
it probably is hard to.
yeah, that's
It's,
I think that if the accessory dwelling unit towards the rear of the lot, if it ends up being the Kager college students, it's a lot more impact because of where it is, say looming over the adjoining
Yeah.
backyard, it can cause some problems. It's a concern.
Right. Well, if they make noise, you call code and we go out and deal with it like we would if it's a principal owner living there or who it's living there.
So you described that in Littleton now, that could be done just without the kitchen, without the stove.
Yeah, this is an extreme example because
Right.
you couldn't cover a lot like this. in
It'd be
Littleton.
smaller.
Right,
You could do that.
right.
What we're talking about tonight is accessory dwelling units where that is actually a unit with a kitchen.
And you could put a kitchen in, so that's the big difference.
Okay.
We're adding the kitchen.
You're adding a stove, not even a kitchen.
Yeah.
Kitchen can be there, it's just a stove.
Yeah, here's some more that are more existing neighborhoods. Top is Boulder, below Durham, North Carolina. That's probably more what you're used to is a little unit in the back. And you can see New Orleans in the lower right-hand corner. You can see the unit in the back. So you got a driveway that comes by. You have a garage with a unit above. So that's probably more of what you'd think of when you think of an accessory dwelling unit.
And I think most jurisdictions are allowing both external and internal too, so a lot of them are the basement apartments or the.
Yeah. That, quite frankly, is one of our bigger issues, is people turning their basements into a unit, and they don't have appropriate exiting and standards to make it a safe unit. So that's an issue we get called out on, not often, but it's something we take pretty seriously.
I like this. I mean, I think it's exactly, I mean, as you showed, there's a lot of communities doing this. I think it, providing a diversity of housing, I think it creates density without, the high rises that we, don't necessarily want. In areas that, we talked about this as well, Glenn, in areas where there are HOAs, the HOA rules trump this, right?
Right.
Because you're agreeing to live in that neighborhood with certain parameters. So I think some of those areas that do have HOA or some form of, or, call it formal
Covenants.
yeah. I think, if it's for that community to decide. But overall, I think this is a good.
They trump as long as they're more restrictive rather than less restrictive than the local jurisdiction.
Let's take Denver. Denver, which I know fairly well, they allow accessory dwelling units in certain areas. So it's not just R1, R2. They've got multiple designations, as you probably know. And some of those multiple USUB-1, it really gets that difficult, allows accessory dwelling units of a certain size. It's not even close to being slightly less than the main house. It's a story and a half, 1,000 square. If you put it over a garage, the garage could be 1,000 square feet. The upstairs would have to be like 650 maximum square feet. No balconies allowed. That balcony I saw in the last slide. No balconies allowed in the rear third of the lot. Any rate, so they really clamp down on the size of that accessory dwelling unit if it's detached. But they only allow it in certain areas. And what I see hinting at is, gee, we're just going to allow it on all the R1, R2, R3 areas, and that doesn't happen in Denver.
And do you know why that was established? So there's two things there. So one, I completely agree that we do have to put limitations that make sense for us in Littleton. The example that you gave, if it's 1,500 versus 1,499, that doesn't cut it. That's two on there. So I think we do have to be a bit more aggressive on that and say, no, it has to be only 50% or 70% of the primary. And then the second point that you made is it's only allowed in certain parts of Denver. Do you know how that criteria was established?
I didn't have time to analyze each zone district in Denver and then look at the map. You have to do that. But I have the sense that it's more of the urban areas, the tighter areas, a place like Platt Park. But you'll get into Washington Park, and I don't think they're allowed in Washington Park.
When Denver went through their zoning revision, their code revision, they started off by looking at each neighborhood and determining what the character of the neighborhood was, and they went through basically block by block. And so what is this, 1-story, 2-story, what size is the lot typically in these lots? And then if you've looked at their zoning, it's over the top complicated. It's really kind of crazy. But at the same time, it accomplished what they did, is that you have a zone district that's basically appropriate to you and a few other people, but it's really distinct. And as they were doing that process, they did the language first, and they came back and did the map amendment. And when they were doing the map amendments, they found the locations in the city they thought were appropriate for the ADUs. They started off, and these were huge neighborhood meetings that they went through, and every neighborhood sat down and mapped their neighborhoods. They started off with a lot more neighborhoods asking for ADUs or accepting ADUs than they ended up with eventually. But they also, they liberalized a little bit in terms of, originally they were only going to allow separate units. They were not going to allow units within the existing dwellings. So they shifted around quite a bit. But now you have to go to the map and be pretty detailed in terms of where you look and how you
It sounds like it
find
was a choice by the neighborhoods and the community, not necessarily criteria dictated by
Yeah, a combination. I mean, the city certainly pushed, I think. Staff really pushed it because they thought it was a good concept, but the neighbors made the final decision.
It's in the city's best interest to have some language around this. I think there's a cart and a horse deal in that people are doing this anyway. They're renting out their basements. They're not safe standards. We at least formalize some structure of what it means to have an apartment above your garage. that could add some value and ideally some public safety value to the conversation.
Yeah, it's just that what scares me is, I use that word scared, is that we blanket all R1, R2, R3. So when the experiences I have in neighborhoods is not. A neighborhood, say, let's throw something out, Heritage neighborhood, once we canvass the area, they're violently against that, then what do we do? To create a special zone, it gets complicated.
Yeah.
So it's excluded there, but it's excluded in the R1 Aberdeen Village, because you canvass a neighborhood and we're for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I wanted to do is kind of show, and these are all abbreviated, all the different standards that I put in the staff report that our consultant stated were addressed by cities all over the country, and maybe get an idea if there's a consensus, what are some of the restrictions we want to look at? One of them being what districts. Now, you can't really pick a neighborhood. I guess you could with an overlay zone.
You'd have to redraw the zoning map.
Right.
Yes.
You'd have to do something from zoning, but are they lower density areas? Are they higher density single family? Which districts? So internal, external. So that's what Dennis mentioned. Internal meaning within the principal structure. So it could be above the garage, but the garage is attached to the house. Some cities say that's the only time you could do accessory dwelling unit because they're ensuring that there's one main entrance in and it's the principal entrance to the house, and they don't want to get into the external garages in the back. I think that's probably going a bit too far, but there are some cities that do that. So that's one set of criteria. Location restrictions is location, I believe that's actually on the lot. So is it a detached unit? Is it, let me check my notes though. No, that's really the zone district. So that's exactly what Mark is talking about. Is which R1 districts or single family districts do you want to allow it and which ones don't you? We've got like 3, R1, 2, and 3. I don't think that really even relates to density. Maybe it does.
Indirectly, yeah, lot size, yeah.
Lot size, most, yeah.
Only to R3X can you do then multifamily.
Good. I'm glad we got the zoning administrator.
Stay in the boat.
Awesome.
Yeah, we move whatever Kurt says.
I mean, in one way, the low-density areas, you wouldn't really notice them. There's a lot of room for them, and that's typically where you have your carriage house type things. But in the higher density areas is where there's probably more demand, too. So, yeah, it's something to consider. Numbers. So some cities actually say you can have more than one. I don't know that we're there yet. So I think we maybe can cross that one off. Density, intensity, some cities are at the point where they want to provide for these, so they don't, if you have an accessory dwelling unit, it doesn't count as part of your coverage.
Expand that, no. You have to, like in R1, R2, R3, I think it's 50% lot coverage.
Yeah.
So you could do a massive house. I think you have to keep that. And the accessory dwelling unit or a standalone garage counts against the open space requirement.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if we're making the point that this isn't really going to change the physical character of your neighborhood, yeah, I don't think we necessarily want to do that.
You mentioned off-street parking in here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's required or not, or whether you'd have to have an additional parking space for that accessory unit or not.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's another one. Again, some cities say if you have parking for the principal residence, you don't need parking for the accessory unit. And other cities say, no, you absolutely have to have parking for that unit, just like you normally would.
If you have a single-family house with a 2-car garage with a parking apron in front of it, could you put 2 cars in the garage, account for the primary, and then a car on the apron to account for the accessory?
Yep.
So there's a lot of houses that would qualify for that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, I guess would that count as tandem parking? Because I don't think we allow tandem parking, meaning counting parking spaces one behind the other. So really, then you can't get the one in front out without the other one moving. So I don't know, we would have to amend our code to say that'd be allowed, but
So if I have a two-car garage, and there's 4 of us in the household driving, so I have 2 cars in the garage and 2 cars in the driveway, can I do that?
yeah, code, because you're
2
meeting,
cars per one single-family unit.
you're meeting, if we said you
Doesn't matter how
had,
many people are drivers in the house.
I have 4 cars in total.
But you're
that
only
isn't-
required to
that's
have
not
2
legal.
cars, parking spots. You may have more, but you're only required to have 2.
you're only required to
So I
have 2.
can have 8 cars and park them along the street,
Yeah.
and that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Those your neighbors don't puncture
Your neighbors
tires.
might think it's a problem, but yeah. It's not a code problem. So size and subordination, so that's making sure the accessory unit is definitely smaller and less obtrusive than the principal residence. And some cities actually say it can be no more than X number of square feet or a percentage of the principal residence. We do have that 50% open space requirement, so I don't know, we almost have that built into our code as well.
You mentioned, Glenn, that in here that most, at least the ones that you mentioned, seem to top out at, say, 800, maybe 1,000 square feet, and some were even smaller, as far as size requirements.
Yeah, yeah,
350 to 450, I think, was one.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's something to explore. And then, you know what setbacks are, whether you have them or not. Some cities, well, I think Denver is an exaggeration on what Mark was telling me, but some cities will say if you don't have access to an alley, it has to meet the setbacks of your principal residence. If you do have an alley and you're accessing off the alley, you can actually build up pretty close to your property line and have access.
But in Denver, if it's accessory dwelling unit over a garage, it has to be in a certain spot on the lot. You have to push it as far to the south as possible so you don't shade the guy to the north of you. So it's all these little caveats that make for, and then there's a boat plane for the, and a height limit, not to the midpoint of the roof, but to the top of the roof. But the boat plane is nasty too, but it tends to keep that second-story dude short, and you're building within kind of the roof and putting a couple of dormers in, that type of thing. So it contains it, which isn't a bad idea, even though I hated designing towards it. It was difficult.
Yeah, yeah, but it limits your options, right? So
And it kept it from really being a bulky monster back there.
So you might have to tear down your garage and move it.
Yeah, if your garage is, say if your garage is, the old garage is 3 feet away from the property line, and the current code say 5 feet away, you want to build on top of the old garage, pop it, sorry, you got a problem with that, 3-foot setback versus the 5 required.
And you might have to move to the other side of the lot.
Yes, that's correct.
No, I don't like trampling too much on people's free will. I mean, you own the airspace above your house, and in city of Littleton, you can have a 3-story unit, right? I mean, there's no, like those duplexes that went in, those are 3 stories. And you didn't tell them they couldn't build because they were going to, give the guy next door too much shade,
no, we didn't.
right?
They were originally approved that way, not
Well,
subsequently,
not
50
necessarily.
or 100 years later, somebody come in and build a monstrosity next to you.
No, these are brand-new units, just built
Right,
within the
and
last...
they were originally zoned and designed that way, and they were approved that way. Where on a 80-year-old house in Denver, you have a little 1,100-square-foot bungalow and think you've got a 1,100-square-foot bungalow next to you, and suddenly there's a 2,800-square-foot house that's
It's a great
40
ballpark.
feet
But
high.
anyone can go up, I mean, anyone can add a
There's
story.
height limits on all those. There's height limits isn't there in every zoning district, there's a height limit.
Right,
on
but
how
like in
high you can
Littleton,
build.
it's 3 stories, right, in downtown area?
CA is 40 feet
See?
right now.
40 feet.
See,
in
I'm
the C.
blanketing the zoning.
In R1, it's 30, I believe, right?
They all have
In single family.
Right,
So you're already restricted in some.
right, but if I've got a 1-story
But if we're going to
home
go
and I
back
wanna
and
build-
allow you to do something else, then I think we have the right to.
We have a right,
limit to put some limits on how high they can go.
all for a lousy stove.
You're granting additional rights, so yeah, you can put limits on that.
A question,
You're still giving them additional rights that they don't have today. So
the original question though was, what was city council's idea when they wanted us to look at this? What were they thinking would happen here? Is this just for elderly people to put an accessory dwelling unit in their backyard?
Yeah, no, to be honest, we haven't had this discussion with the council, but I think you're probably right, that it's come a goal for DRCOG to provide for our aging population.
So
and
if that's truly
this
the
is one
goal,
way.
if that's what we're looking at doing, then I think we need to restrict it to a very small unit, 1 or 2 bedrooms, 600 to 700 square feet maximum. Maybe a third of what the main house is, of 1,500 square feet, you can get 450 in the back. If it's 2,000, you can get 600 square feet, or something along those lines to restrict the size, if we're doing it for that purpose. If we're doing it to make multiple family units so people can rent them out, that's a different
Well, is this
ballgame.
for the purpose of somebody allowing their parents to live in the accessory unit? Or is it for somebody who's aging in place to give them extra income so they can afford?
Yeah, it's both.
Yes, the answer is
I
yes.
think we can.
And it's a trend in the market that there's a need for diversity in housing for all ages, right? So I think it's not, regardless of what council's intent was, I think they posed that, question out there for us to take a look at, but I think now we need to take a look at that and say, what does accessory dwelling units really mean? How are they being used? What do we see the future? Where's that driving us? And how do we, as Littleton, remain competitive in the market from a housing perspective? And if this is one of the things that keeps us competitive and brings, either keeps our people here or brings new people here, then that's what we're bringing forward. I don't think it's just limiting it to specifically what did council ask us to do, because I think that's too limiting.
Except no college students.
That's hard to do.
See, I don't think we can,
No, you can't. And I think what Glenn did here is, he's just saying, if we do accessory dwelling units, here's all the things we can consider and put into place. And then we can have that discussion. Maybe, area by area, we'll have different restrictions depending on what the neighborhood dynamic is, what the neighborhood wants or doesn't want. So we can, I think the point is we have a lot of things to work with that still allows a property owner the ability to,
And kind of in response to the concern about the individual neighborhoods, I think Denver had the same issue, and what they did was they tried to think, what's the common thread here, too, as they were looking at it. So in some cases, they said, well, maybe it's a corner lot. A corner lot, particularly if you're on a busier street, a certain traffic volume, those may have more impacts and may be more appropriate to put there. So if you can come up with some commonalities so you don't have to go through and actually analyze every block or every sub-area of the neighborhood, it simplifies the process a little bit.
when there's some things that can be put in place that pretty much eliminates the majority of the lots. I mean, if you have to require an additional parking spot on a lot, you may eliminate most all lots in Littleton, unless it has alley access or...
Downtown or in the central
Yeah,
area.
or the detached
Small lots.
rear garage, or...
Yeah.
That pretty much dictates one place it'll go because of that. That isn't to say somebody couldn't scrape off and just redesign it. That's a whole other issue, is scrape-offs.
What about making it a conditional use where they have to come to us for each unit?
Right, that's approval. So some cities do require special approval.
And what, a 5-year review or something? That seemed to be cumbersome.
I guess that's open for your decision.
I
But what
think
did
you
they
guys
have to get a
I think you would be
permit?
inundated.
If there was a change in ownership or a change in renter, then they might have to come back, but not.
Could be every 6 months.
But if they do,
I think it might have just said change in ownership, like if you sold your property, new owner comes in, then they would have to go back and reapply.
Why?
I'd want the right
That's
to
just what
stay with the
some
property.
municipalities just,
See, and that's where I'd say, yeah, conditional use, it's about the use, not the person. So I don't know that you could do that from a zoning end. Now, on a licensing end, you could always require the owner to keep his license current. But that's all it would be, is make sure we had the current owner on file and all their vitals.
doesn't the permit, if they were building or adding or modifying in any significant way to create an accessory dwelling unit, they'd go through a permit process, so wouldn't it just be isn't that essentially a form of the approval? Or are you suggesting that they have something in addition to?
Some cities require more of a public process. So you post it and you get to hear the neighbors.
The neighbors?
I'm thinking, I wonder if there's an incentive for folks that are already using, like you said, a sort of illegal accessory dwelling unit, a way to get them to come in just to make sure that these units are safe, like you said, and have the
Yep.
fire code, and is there some sort of incentive we can build in there to get those people to
Yep.
come into compliance, more or less?
That's amnesty. That's the final bullet. Right.
And incentives, too, you talked about waiving fees, that sort of thing.
Some cities do. And that's where there's a real shortage of housing, and they want to really provide additional housing units, so they'll waive fees, they'll waive impact fees in order to support that.
A lot of the illegal basements, they wouldn't come in because when you go in and inspect it, you'll require an egress window in that bedroom, which requires cutting out the concrete, putting in a well with a ladder and all that. And
Right.
right now, they got little windows that big in the bedrooms, and
Yeah.
you die if there's a fire.
Right.
So they won't come in because they don't want to spend the money. So
Yeah.
It's $15, but I had to spend $3,000 to do it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I feel better now.
Thank you. I'm glad we could serve our
Can I talk a little bit about the process here? This is not your little minor house clean. This is a major change in zoning in Littleton. Typical, our process would be to get staff to write it up. We talk about it in a meeting like this. We have one public hearing, and then we vote on it and send it off to council. It can't be that way this time. We need public buy-in on this. And we could get, I'm just pointing it out ahead again, Heritage Neighborhood could come in violently against it, and not, they don't want it. So I think we need to change the equation where we get a lot more public input before we have this, official meeting where we take official testimony from the public. It has to be different. We need buy-in, and this is big for Littleton.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I chose this to talk about this with neighborhood plans, because this is something that could be seen as impacting the neighborhood that we haven't really addressed, I don't think, in any of our neighborhood plans.
So we could wait, and every time we do a neighborhood plan, really do a neighborhood plan, then we can have the neighborhood discuss it and straw vote it. And so it might take 10 years to implement accessory dwelling units.
Well, I think that's why I think it's valid to bring it to council to, kind of share the research that you did and the diligence to find out what's being done, and I think that's what they asked you to do. And then for us to be able to, the same debate we had here is to, kind of have that same discussion with council to make sure they're ready to, feel strongly enough that we continue to push this process forward, and then we define what that process is going to have to look like, and one option could be the neighborhood planning. But I think it's important that we, recognize that this is something that is of significant interest to council that's worth our moving forward with, and prioritize it as such.
The other piece of, go ahead, because the other piece of information I think is critical is that even with the communities that have passed this, that have it, there doesn't have to be a huge market. There aren't a lot of houses being built with ADUs, a lot of houses being retrofitted with ADUs, a lot of houses being sold, and it may be kind of the swimming pool issue. Yeah, the swimming pool sounds great, but when you try and sell a house, it can be a real liability. And it could be to have an ADU. It could be a real liability for a lot of people. They don't want to buy a house with an ADU. They want to buy a single-family house. And so it could really limit that market. But for some reason, as part of the financing, there are not a lot of them being built. So it's not like there's going to be a rush, I think, on the market necessarily.
What other communities allow them besides Denver?
Golden, all of Jefferson County, Boulder,
Arvada?
Salida, Denver, it goes on. And it's lots of little towns as well as larger communities.
Arvada would be the closest to our
Right.
Carolina
And Golden.
City.
Golden does too. And Golden does a really nice job of kind of promoting it. And Arvada's been promoting it as well. But last I talked to Arvada, they hadn't had a huge rush. So.
Have they had any that we?
They've had some, I think,
Some.
yeah. not what they expected, yeah.
I mean, the home builders, I think the same home builders are in Stapleton. When they built here, they didn't even want to think about it. I mean, it never even came up. So I don't know that they really have that big a demand for them.
Stapleton zoning allows it. They start off by building a few of them, and they don't seem to be building them anymore. I don't know why.
See, I think you do have HOAs that exist that specifically exclude it. It's single family and there is no opportunity for an accessory dwelling unit, right? But the flaw in our code, and that shows the age of it, is that somebody can go build an accessory dwelling unit, do it all just without the range. So it's not like you're going to do this next door, I'm going to be upset, because you could do it already.
Use by right.
So we're just trying to now, let's update and let's frame some general rules, and that's what most of the other cities have done. So it's not like city council is telling us to do this. We're just, I think, it's an allowed
Being proactive
thing to do
about it,
already.
yeah.
Acknowledging what's out there.
Frame it a little bit.
Yeah, so it's
And
done
again,
well.
it's not going to be a mad rush, likely. But, and so I think it does end up being by zone district that those rules generally apply.
We've got a good point. It's a use by right now, very large structure, and whatever height, but without the range. But if we're going to allow the range, it sounds like, as Kurt said, we put some limits on it, maybe square footage, the heights, setbacks, lot coverage, that kind of thing. So somebody says, but that's a huge change, like I just said a few minutes ago, maybe it's not, because is this a use by right quite a bit?
Yeah, I could go do it now.
Yeah.
And I just won't put a stove in.
I'll just put a barbecue in the backyard.
Well, you could have a microwave convection oven.
Yeah, that's right, you can. That's right, you can.
Yep.
It's really an opportunity to kind of frame it a little bit better.
Yeah,
And
I think that's
Well, I think
valid.
public safety is an important thing.
Yeah.
That's a good point, as people do it anyhow, and they won't meet code, and then we have to deal with that at some point. So, yeah, of this list, I mean, is there 4? Does anybody have an idea of what top 4 would be important,
Size.
or 5?
Height, definitely, height.
Location.
Height, setbacks.
Okay, how many people say,
Let's make
I'm
it.
going to make you vote on this?
Glenn, why are you asking?
Just to try and get to a consensus of what areas, if we did allow them, what areas we'd like to look at for restrictions.
No separate sale, that's important. It's going to be an 80.
I think no separate sale probably goes without saying, because we have a minimum lot size, and
I think number, I wouldn't think having more than one accessory dwelling unit.
definitely not more than one.
Size and subordination would be very important.
Okay?
I think encroaching on somebody's setback would be an issue if I'm a neighbor and somebody wants to do an ADU into the setback and now you're 3 feet from my back porch.
Those
some
are all kind
cities-
of related, though. I mean, when you talk about size, subordination, density, that addresses setbacks, that addresses height. I mean, you almost have to consider all those things as you think about density or intensity. When you think about size, you have to consider all those things.
I think
Some are like subsets of
entrance
others.
is probably a lower one.
Lower priority, I'd have incentives, I'd have amnesty.
So I think if we're talking public safety, I think amnesty moves up a little bit to get some of
I think it's a
these,
joke, though.
you don't
I think
know.
for
They're not
anything
going
moving
to go.
forward, it's darn real, but for anything that currently exists.
I think it's worth a try.
You wouldn't want to try and bring them in and have them meet code? If somebody's
I
got,
would prefer that they would be in that position
Especially
already,
if it's in the
but if
basement.
I'm a guilty party of it, and I realize there's a $3,000...
fess up, Andrew, fess up.
It's like
You'll feel better.
It's like having a dog license, right? I could come in here and get a dog license, or I could just walk my dog. And if you never know I have a dog, I'm not going to give you a dog license.
Yep.
I'm not advocating that that's the right position, I'm just saying that's the honest thing to explain.
Doesn't mean as we as a board, though, can't offer it, and I'll sleep better tonight that it's there, you know? Doesn't mean they're going to comply, but I'm giving you the option.
I don't think
making
it's a
it important.
priority. So I think, I mean,
It's only
yeah,
a
I think it's
problem
a nice
when
to
the house
have.
burns down and the tenant dies and
And
the
there's-
insurance company refuses to cover it.
Well, it's a problem too, if there's a
That's the
complaint,
It's the owner's problem.
and
Right. It's
code,
the owner choosing to say, I'm going to operate outside the law, understanding the risks associated with that, and take full responsibility for anything
And I don't, we've had owners who often don't know or claim they don't know, and I think some of them don't know when they buy the house. It's not a legal unit. And so we have that issue repeatedly, I think.
I'm just saying, for the interest of Glenn's, what's a priority and what's not,
Yeah.
I would put amnesty in the lower end of the
Why don't we
list.
have amnesty for building code?
You know, when we actually find out about them is when someone is buying a house. And they go in, they inspect it, and they go, hey, is this really a dwelling unit in my basement? And that's normally when we get a call.
Respond to rat finks, ratting out the neighbor.
Or a neighbor, yeah. They didn't return the lawnmower on time. So I don't know what.
So your overhead fence is now fair game.
That's right.
Most we get, I think, is from former tenants who have complaints about the former landlord in the illegal unit.
That's a good point, yeah.
That's right.
Right.
It
Yeah.
wasn't a safe unit they rented to.
Okay, so kind of the bulk requirements,
Side setback height.
Straight zoning issues, we probably could put it under.
and what districts, right? And what districts, is that what you mean? Where is it appropriate?
Zoning districts.
I think, that's a tough, yeah, I'm thinking like in the Heritage District where you've got Front Range Road, those houses are on an acre. They may want to build a separate unit for their nanny. I don't know that we can assume that certain areas want them or don't want them.
That's
You
why we
know?
go in the neighborhood. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just picked something out of the hat.
Well, no, I just, in terms of, I don't think,
I don't think we should restrict it to zoning.
Yeah.
I think we go into the neighborhoods and then determine how to address it. Isn't that what you're saying?
That,
Some criteria like traffic volume or,
see, the problem with that is you couldn't say it's allowed in this R3 but not this R3 because your neighbors said no. It would have to be across the board. So unless you have a public hearing on each one,
but could you come up with criteria, like it would be allowed in R3 if these
I think
criteria-
you keep the criteria of a certain amount of open space and it's got to be subservient and keep it at that. I think that's
zoning
good.
requirements that are setback, open space requirements, height. It'll somewhat self-regulate itself because the land can only support so much. If you have an acre, you're great. You got room. But if you're on 5,000 square feet and you already have a bungalow on there, you may not be able to do it.
Well, not that I want it gets messy, but two neighborhoods, both in R1. Neighborhood A doesn't want it, fine, you leave the R1. The second neighborhood wants it,
Change it to R2.
you rezone the district as
Yeah.
R1-789 or
Yep,
something.
that's what you'd have to do.
That you'd have to do that.
Yeah.
And you'd have to get every owner to agree that
Every
that's what
owner
you're going to
to
do,
Kill that.
to rezone it, and that's going to be impossible.
Well, let's move on. I think we all have
Beat this one pretty good.
questions, and I think we should continue to bring it up from time to time.
Yeah, well, it'll be an interesting conversation tomorrow.
Yeah.
With council. Okay. So next, we've talked a little bit about VRBO. We had this conversation. I thought, again, this could be potentially something that affects neighbors and neighborhoods. I grabbed this one. This is in Columbine Valley. It's a real bargain. It's $325 a night. You have to rent it for 3 nights. So what's VRBO? So by current city code, we have this thing where our code says you can have a tourist home or rooming and boarding in R5T and CA. We don't really define what a tourist home is, but I think we've kind of interpreted it as that's you renting out rooms within your house, and that's certainly rooming and boarding is defined that way. That's rooming and boarding is actually an allowed use in all residential district, which makes sense. You can bring a roommate into your house and rent out a room to them, but the owner stays always on the property. So that's really the biggest difference between what we allow and a VRBO. The stays are always less than 30 days, and the owner isn't there. They're renting out their complete unit.
are the other two similar to that as well? You mentioned
Air-
Airbnb and bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
Airbnb is really renting out a room, and the owner is there. So that is an allowed use. We We don't care who your guests are. And bed and breakfast, same thing. You have an owner proprietor there, and they're renting out rooms, and so on. So.
And you mentioned, I think, in here that Boulder cracked down on Airbnb, but they've since, within a day, they pulled back.
Did they? I didn't catch the pulling back part.
Yeah, they pulled back and they're gonna, look at it, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, and from the sound of it, it sounds like they have a code very similar to ours, that they were kind of making an interpretation in order to tell people they can't do a VRBO.
I think what it was is a particular department came out with that a letter to each owner that they found on Airbnb, and then the council or somebody else put the kibosh on that and said, let's look at this.
Oh, yeah, I didn't get the rest of the story.
I kind of skimmed the articles when it came. It was been about a week or so.
Actually, Airbnb is primarily rooms, but you can rent houses.
Or couches,
Yeah, I rented a room in San Diego on Airbnb, and the owner wasn't there.
Yeah. Oh,
So, I'm sorry, I'm actually not completely
I
following.
used everything.
So, what is allowed right now? Let's not call it VRBO, let's not call it Airbnb. What are you allowed to do right now with your home and where? Maybe it was your first slide.
okay. You can rent your home out, usually
Rent
for
my home out.
longer periods, 6 months to a year. I mean, there's no city regulation says you cannot do that.
So short term, can I rent my home out for 30 days?
There's nothing in our code that says you can do that.
That I can do
Can
that?
do that. Right.
Doesn't say you can't do it.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that
does
what
it
you're
say
saying?
you can rent it for a
I guess the
minimum?
question is that a tourist home? And that's where we struggle, and that is not allowed in those single-family districts.
Go back to the first page then.
This is actually Jan's done all the research, and she's out sick today, so I'm trying to filter it. So
If you go
this
back
is-
to the first one, the first page? Okay, so right now, in R5, T and CA, you can rent out your home or a room in your home for a day.
Right.
Because we don't have any terminology around what a tourist home is, it doesn't give you time limits or how many people or how many times a year.
Oh,
So
up to
right
30
now,
days. Up to 30
Well, what
days.
is that second point?
Right, up to 30 days.
Allows room boarding
That's
as-
an interpretation, though.
as
It's not actually-
accessory use in a residential district.
All residential.
So anyone can have a
Depending on one or
roommate.
two or three.
It's everything, which means you can rent out a room. Or you
So
can rent
I
out
live in
multiple rooms.
Heritage neighborhood right now. I can rent out a room in my home for 3 days or 6 months or?
No,
Is there,
Yeah, it'd have
so
to be
there's
more
a
than 30
definition
days.
of room
It would have to
boarding?
be
It
more than
has to
30.
be-
It has to be more than 30
More than
days.
30 days. But it could be 20 years, you could rent out for 20 years. All right.
Are both of these more than 30 days? Or the first one is less?
No, tourist home is almost like a hotel.
Could I rent it out for 31 days and then the guy leaves after 3? I mean,
Yeah.
just semantics, right? So I say, you're gonna rent it out for 31 days, but your intention is to stay here 2 nights.
Yeah.
But,
Cancel it anytime.
Oh,
yeah,
lower the
50 cents a
rate.
day.
Oh, I love it. Very sneaky.
Can the city approach this more like a conditional use or a special permit? That if I want to do a VRBO, I get my tourist home permit, and that allows me for this?
Potentially. One of the things that, again, our consultant kind of is concerned about is that whole thing about who is living there. So we can't really, as a city, say, you can live there, they can't. So they actually recommend you do it through licensing and not through zoning.
Kind of what you're saying, right, Andrew, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just something that doesn't need us to make a broad brush take on this, that just says, if you want to rent your home, there's just specific rules we want you to do, in the same way that you're going to have a blowout kegger party in your backyard, you got to have a party permit.
Cops
If
will
you're going to
turn
have
up.
a rental, then get a rental permit.
Right,
we advertise.
right. Yeah, you would not, as planning board, you would not be involved in that. So that would be through,
Fine.
right, that's a good thing.
Better.
So we can make sure they pay taxes just like any business. And now she pulled some standards off of more of a resort community up north. I forget which one it was, but they had standards that you had to maintain the appearance of the residential dwelling. I don't know why she has one kitchen facility in there. And mitigate any impacts to make sure it's consistent with a single-family residential use.
Is that Estes Park?
It was Estes Park. Yes, thank you. So I thought I'd throw this out on the agenda again. We started to talk about it, and I think some were in favor, some were against, but I thought it was a big enough issue after seeing that thing in Boulder that we present it to council and get their input on it.
For tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night? If anybody wants to live in Columbine Valley, there's a great
Yours.
No, it's not. You should look at it, though. It's a lot of paneling, a lot of wood paneling.
So for tomorrow night, you're going
4-day wood paneling, cheap
It's
stuff.
close to the golf course.
It was up for sale, and I don't think they got what they wanted. It might still be on the market, actually.
Oh, okay, so this is kind of filling in the gap.
Your overnight guest, and a realtor setting like that.
There may be interrupted stays with showings.
There's a lot of wood paneling, isn't there? Have you seen it, the inside?
I think I glanced at it.
Hey, Glenn, it's, the two articles are Boulder issues cease and desist orders on 20 property owners. Boulder rescinds cease and desist orders to homeowners.
Really?
Number 1 and 2.
You know, the difference is I don't think Littleton's a huge hot spot for tourists.
Not yet.
Not
Not
quite.
yet.
Is there something going to happen on Monday?
No, but if we think about the focus on the river and what we're looking to perhaps
But, you know,
do
Boulder
on-
being a college town, you've got people coming to see their kids, and, yeah, so it seems like we'll have quite the same
It was city
demand.
council that was surprised by the cease and desist orders.
Okay, so it was like a staff interpretation, I think, and they
Departments don't know what they're
took
doing.
action. How unusual, yeah.
They actually have a study session next month.
Really?
Hey, let's all go.
Oh, field trip.
Road
Is that
trip.
on TV?
So we wear matching t-shirts. Can you talk about bed and breakfast? We kind of cut you short. And what about bed and breakfast? How does that fit into this? Does that?
We don't define it in our zoning code. So I think the way we were looking at it, I believe, and I'll touch base with Jan, but I think we were looking at it as you're renting out a room just like a VRBO or an Airbnb, and there's really nothing wrong with that per se. Am I right? 'Cause, I mean, our code just doesn't address it.
Our code doesn't address it, and we don't really deal with the size. Usually communities deal with bed and breakfast. It's, how many rooms do you have? How
Isn't
many
there a
guests do you have?
taxing
So
issue there?
there is,
They become a business.
business.
No.
Business licenses.
So any house in, like an R1 district, Aberdeen Village, could start a B&B.
I don't think so.
I don't know.
Why do you say no?
Try
I guess it
and
comes
find
down
out.
to
Doesn't that make it become a business use, therefore it changes the
home.
use?
Yeah, more of a commercial use.
There's some
residential.
fine lines there between,
Isn't it VRBO, a business
Yeah.
use?
Yeah.
yeah.
Do we have any B&Bs in Littleton?
No, but we should.
B&Bs, we do not.
I don't know of any.
So
Get on it, Katrina, get on it.
are you going to present tomorrow basically what you
Yeah.
did here?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
yeah, throw it out there, discuss amongst yourself.
How much time do we have tomorrow, by the way?
You're the only ones on the agenda, so
So what
couple
about-
hours?
Are you bringing in pizza or?
No, they're not going to feed you, so you're going to have to eat on your own.
Starts at 6:30.
6:30?
At 6 o'clock, we get food.
I said 6:30.
That is the rule.
Tricky,
Yes.
tricky.
Right.
Okay.
I might mention some cities actually do not allow these. San Francisco is one of them, for a couple of reasons. One, to protect the hotel industry, and one, to protect affordable housing. Because they do have rent-controlled units, and what they're finding is people are taking their rent-controlled units, leasing them out. There's a high demand for people to come and stay in San Francisco, and so it's eroding the affordable housing programs.
I think that's
So-
more for New York and.
Yeah, they're doing that in
It's
New
those
York.
big cities with those kind of issues, yeah.
Yeah. 300 square feet for 300 a night.
Okay.
Okay, well, that covers three topics. One thing we wanted to talk about is planning a board retreat sometime in May. There's not really a particular topic, but it just seems like the last one we had was a couple years ago, I think it was. And at the time, we were deep into the comprehensive plan update, and we heard from a couple guests, our then new economic development director, and a real estate expert. We heard from him. But one of the things that we thought would be a good idea would be to invite various business owners, institution, not necessarily CEOs or presidents, but maybe managers from like Littleton Hospital, maybe the brewery, I don't know, when it'll be open by then, maybe.
Hey, we could have it there.
Good idea.
Oh, I think we should.
When does it open?
Andrew's interested.
When does it open?
Put him down.
Fully operational by May, so.
We just
That's
found
right,
our,
opening in May.
we just picked
Be part of the
our venue. But to have them come and maybe, 15, 20-minute presentations to give us a sense of how their business is doing. Maybe they have some community-related issues and/or pieces of information that we could hear. But it would be a way of the board as a whole hearing from a variety of community leaders and/or owners to get a cross-section of what's happening in Littleton from people we probably never would hear from. They would never necessarily come to a hearing. They may never show up at an open house, neighborhood meeting. They might. But as we do move into neighborhood plan updates, corridor plans, activity areas, so on and so forth, these businesses, organizations, neighborhood leaders, maybe HOA presidents, I don't know, these various plans will affect them. And it would be Aspen Grove, the management company of Aspen Grove, might be fun to hear from them, or good to hear from them as to how that development is doing, how that project's doing, and their thoughts on light rail as it relates to Aspen Grove. As South Glen came online, I believe it took businesses away from Aspen Grove, and what are they doing about that, or how are they combating that? So that's the real loose idea at this point. We're thinking around sometime in May. Now I'm thinking it's based upon the opening of the brewery, when that might happen. That's a really good idea. Maybe they could donate a room to us for a day.
Do you have an approximate date? Do you have a date in mind?
No,
Dates in mind?
haven't gotten that far. But I want to open it up to the board, and just talk briefly about if there's anything that you wanted to talk about as a board and as a whole. We're entering a new year. Different things are going on. We got the urban renewal districts approved. We're starting a couple big studies, Santa Fe corridor study. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe throw out some topics or things that might be a good hour discussion or so in a retreat kind of setting. And it would probably be on a Saturday. and start at around 8 or so, and then end around 4:30 or something like that. So open it up. Any thoughts, added topics maybe, or?
It helps if there's a purpose. Like a specific, we are going to walk out of that one-day session having achieved. If it is indeed just, I liked your examples, to gain an understanding of the business community's perspective on Wheels and Vertiport. Okay, great. That's a purpose. It should be much more defined. Are we going to be leaving doing something different? Are we going to be leaving thinking something different? Are we going to be leaving understanding something different? Are we going to be leaving more aware of something? Whatever that is, that it is. Yes, and your comment, the business perspective on how Littleton can grow is never virtually spoken. We hear from a handful of community members on a number of topics, but it's a small group. I would say, just as an offer of something maybe different than that, business leaders being one, homeowners association presidents. Maybe that's more specific to neighborhoods than it is to a citywide gathering, but they would be a population that we don't always hear from, or maybe the city hears from. It could go a direction of just the tactical day-to-day operations of what it takes to run the city, things that the fire department wishes the planning board paid attention to, things that any of those could be tangents of that similar thing. I would just want to make sure that it's a good use of our time.
Will your planning consultant have anything by that time? Any?
Or
The land use one?
Yeah, do you have a land use planning consultant that we're working on? Will they have any preliminary information at that time?
Should,
that they could
yeah, at that point.
possibly,
Maybe.
I mean, it's an idea. If they're,
You mean the guy?
that was here.
Oh, our zoning consultant?
Yeah, zoning consultant.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, the end of this month, they do have a report that staff is reviewing right now on all the goofy things in our zoning code and what it should look like in the end. So yeah, that's been done, and there is a subcommittee that's looking at that, but...
They might bring that to us before May then.
Yeah.
In a meeting. But if not, that could... Right.
They may they might present that to you in March, actually.
Yeah, okay.
I think to dovetail what you were just saying, Andrew, I think if you had major stakeholders, whether it's Arapahoe Community College, Breckenridge Brewery, Norgren, maybe it's larger, more active developers even, and you gave them 15 minutes to present, why are you here, what do you like about Littleton, what's going well, because you might hear from ACC that they hear consistently from students that there is no availability of housing options. And, housing options is something that would come across our table. But, as you suggest, to make it very organized and, productive for them, hopefully they get some value out of it, and we hear something as well. But you can identify, 4 or 5, 6, whatever, parties that would be interesting to hear from.
Yeah.
There's a model called PESTLE. What's the political impact? What's the economic impact? What's the social impact? What's the technology impact? And if we could pick a topic or something and have 5 or 6 different presentations from different viewpoints, just take developing the river. We hear from the developers all the time. We hear from the economic people all the time. We've never once heard from eco-friendship about what's the nature impact of what all this is, and what are your primary concerns about if we were to build this cool river walk there, how many ducks are we going to kill?
We've got the, rangers from Carson Nature Center.
Are they with South Suburban?
South Suburban Park, yeah.
Yeah.
Or, and then there's Hudson Gardens, which is along the river. Rich Meredith is the CEO.
That is one of your transformative actions, right? How we develop the river, so that might be something.
Yeah, that might be like a theme. You could have
That's
property
getting
owners along
excited
the
about.
road.
Going to a meeting isn't worth getting excited about.
Right.
going to something that we're transforming the river.
Yeah. And I think, I agree with you. I think if we set a purpose to it, then we can begin to narrow down what the focus of the meeting is so that we put the right agenda topics there that, again, result in some sort of action or takeaway. The other one that comes to mind for me is Littleton High School, for example, and Heritage High School. So we heard in the Heritage neighborhood meeting that we're not at capacity. So if you think there's traffic issues now, wait until we get to capacity. And we have the development on, what's it called, Littleton Village now, not Marathon Oil anymore. So what's that, what do they foresee happening there? So I think there's topics like that, just like you mentioned, the ACC, as another one to understand what is their potential and what are their future goals and what are they driving towards, and then we need to be aware of that as we consider our neighborhood plan. So it ties into our neighborhood planning. The other thing that I've shared with Glenn and Randy was taking a look at, and this comes up for me at least, when we think about the corridor, specifically Littleton Boulevard, the opportunity to, what do we define Littleton Boulevard as? And I've attended several conferences on art and art districts and how they can stimulate economic redevelopment. And so that might be something that we can learn more about as a planning group, to think about, is Littleton a place that we want to promote the arts and with that create economic development. So I think there's a lot of case studies that we can look at if that's something that might be, either that we're hearing from the community or feel that, the planning board feels that that's maybe a direction we can take. And some other reasons why I'm bringing that one up in particular, and I'm somewhat passionate about it, there's a few reasons, but, one of the things when I first moved out here, and Mark, you probably remember this because you've been out here a while as well, there used to be lots of little art studios in downtown Littleton, and then you weren't here that long? How long have you been here?
No, 22 years.
So there used to be lots of little galleries and studios downtown that then, I think, my guess is they got pushed out because rents got too high. And now where is that community? So I think that community is still in Littleton, but they just have nowhere to kind of come forward again. And that might be, something we want to bring to the surface again and position it as a potential economic development opportunity for us too.
People were talking about businesses, and we never invite business people. We never hear from business people. We hear from community activists, and we talk amongst ourselves, and we got staff input. Very rarely do we go out and get the businesses pulled in. But in regards to that, we talk about retail of the future. It's all online now. What's the future of retail generally, and what's the future of retail in Littleton? And retail and business have tremendous impact on things we do every day here at the planning board, and what every citizen does every day in Littleton. That's a whole retreat right there.
You think there'd be an organization or a person that would be able to speak to that? Or
No, I'd have to think about it, or let our community development director take care of it.
Autonomous type, it would be a futurist type, it would be
Actually, there was just I think a TED Talk on that. Let me see if I can find it in my emails, and I'll forward it to you, Glenn.
There's brokers too, that's their bread and butter. They're trying to bring in retailers, and I just sat down for an hour last Friday with one that was talking through all the different retailers he's tried to bring to a certain site.
Or maybe we find out after a whole Saturday that retail is dead and dying, and it's all push a button and you get your tea, like Star Trek,
right.
Next Generation, and we've got to go elsewhere with our planning. And so we become the, what do you call it there? The amusement park city or something. Right.
Although Amazon is looking to build a brick and mortar store, just saying. So, you never know.
Be a big one.
Yeah.
IKEA. Books. Let's just get an IKEA and then we'll all be fine.
Yeah.
Good.
Get that
You could
approved.
plop it right down on this.
That's right.
It would fit. A lot of good ideas.
Yeah. No, I think that's very good. I totally agree with needing a purpose. What's the outcome? What do we walk away with? So I think Glenn and I and Karina, I think, if you're okay with that, we'll kind of narrow that down and hopefully in a week or two be able to at least email out maybe a draft agenda and purpose statement to get your comments on again and then begin to set some dates. Probably pick 2 or 3 Saturdays and get a consensus on how that works for everybody. The other challenge is getting a group of these people to all be able to commit to a Saturday, whether it's 15 minutes. We hopefully could get enough people, leaders, and to be able to show up for that. So.
Are you set on May, or are you flexible at that time?
No, we're just thinking.
Summer,
the
people
new-
start traveling.
Yeah, before June would be good, but
Or if we can do it in September.
we could even wait till September. So, and it may be the reality of, I mean, if this really gets going with some steam, and we start getting a list of quality leaders to come talk to us, it may take us till September to really put together a good agenda, and it might be pretty exciting to wait until we really have that full roster of speakers. So that's all I have. Glenn, anything else?
No, other than our next meeting, because there's interviews with council, so we had to cancel the February 23rd, so don't show up here unless you're being interviewed.
Yes.
Yes.
That was
And
my
please.
question. When's the next round? Is it, next week is the round of interviews? Or was
No,
it-
it's at 20th,
2 weeks
the week of the
tonight, interviews
23rd.
start.
Yeah.
Are you?
I assume it's open to the public.
It's televised too, I think, isn't it?
I don't know.
The interviews?
No, they're not televising
They're
it
not.
anymore.
Why not?
Are they videotaped?
It's a closed
Viewership
meeting.
is down there.
We need Beyonce or something. All right, that's it for tonight.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.